So let us start. Ben, are you with us, Ben?
I am with you.
That is excellent. Would you would you like to start?
Love to. All right.
I will keep time.
Yeah.
So
Just yell stop
I'll
at me.
I'll give you a sort of 5 minute and a 2 minute warning. Is that all right?
That'll be lovely. Thank you. All right.
Brilliant.
I'm going to absolutely blast through a ton of slides and tell a bit of a story. So 2 seconds. Let me just. They change up the how you present in everything all the time, don't they? I'm getting too old for this iterative software business. Here we go. All right, can you see some pink slides?
Yes.
Wicked. Okay. Hey. So yeah, thanks for having me. This telling a bit of a story from the organisation I used to work for, Buckinghamshire Council, and this was around building a better family information service. Family information service is made up of a number of parts. There's actually quite a lot of things that happen within the context of this team. Largely, their responsibility is about early help and prevention. So they are there to support families and to give them information, advice, guidance, and access to things that will prevent, I guess, an escalation of needs that might require more kind of acute and expensive services having to intervene later on. So super service, do really, really good work. In this case, they were being held up by a pretty janky old product. So we were working with them to make that better. So I'm going to rattle through what we made, how we did it, and kind of what the team, I believe, are doing now. Myself, I kind of left the organisation a year or so ago. So some of this is based on me just believing in my heart that they carried on with the good work we did. So the job, we wanted to build a simpler, clearer service for residents, but also for staff. There's quite a lot of administrative, back officey type stuff that happened in this service that was also being held back by some of the technology they were using. And I think quite often, in rightly focusing on the needs of residents and citizens, we sometimes forget that there are teams of people fighting with really, really poor systems in their day-to-day, and then that can have quite an impact as well. So we wanted to hit both sides of this particular problem. The main body of the work happened over about that much time. We did loads of user research, lots of engagement with the service, absolutely reams of content that needed to be designed, and we built some new products as well that didn't exist before, which is fab. So what we did was kind of atomize the service into a number of pieces. So there are information and advice pages. So content. So obviously content management system, kind of good content design approaches. There's a service directory, so a way for people to search through lists of services that are provided by voluntary community sectors, public services, commercial organizations that might meet their needs. And that could be anything from, I don't know, a very specific support service for children with autism through to just things to do in the holidays and everything in between. So giving people a way to kind of, search and filter their way through that stuff. And then in the kind of background, we needed a way for the team to manage all of these services. There's a huge number of things that come into these directories. So obviously the team need to have a process for keeping that data trustworthy, good governance, good ways of kind of keeping records accurate and up to date. We also were a consumer of data into this service. So anything that is a registered childcare service has to come from a feed of data from Ofsted. So we can't just chuck stuff on a directory that says, I'm a childcare provider. You have to show that you are an Ofsted registered childcare provider. And the way that happens is we take a data feed from Ofsted. There's a process in the service to check that there are no flags against that organization locally for issues to do with safeguarding, and then a kind of publishing step that happens to let that then be visible in the service to residents. And that's a kind of daily updated feed of data. So we needed a way to consume and verify and publish. We then pushed data out the other side with a nice kind of open standards-based API so that other folks could access that data and build other services with it. And that was actually the same API set that we used to build our own kind of directory interfaces. So we were kind of eating our own dog food there with the API. There was a reporting service as well. So there's a lot of useful information about service access and coverage and need that you can pull out of a service like this. So we made sure that we had a way to kind of pipe that data into a reporting and analytics service as well, so that the team can kind of have a look through, understand, and see how that might affect some of the commissioning intentions of the organization. What that means is you've got a user journey here that crosses more than one product. So all of the content was published on the council's main website. And so what I should say here is the original product was this really tightly integrated, messy, difficult joint directory and content management system and front end thing. It was like this big monolithic block. And it meant it was really hard. It was hard to work with. And the company who operated it were not super keen on kind of really innovating that product. So quite a difficult piece of work here was to work with the team to help them understand how splitting this stuff out could be useful, how having the content on the main council website, the place where the vast majority of residents start their journeys for stuff like this, and then having other ways of dealing with some of the service directory stuff. And so the URLs for those services are there. You can see there's still a lot of consistency in the design language here. So making sure, not absolutely uniform, but nice and consistent to make sure people didn't get lost and confused. So information advice pages, a little before and after snapshot here. Relatively small visual changes, but important stuff, much more accessible, much more consistent with the overall design language of the council, and also, using a much more modern kind of content management system here as well. So we shifted over to something called Wagtail, which is an absolutely lovely publishing experience for content designers to use. It's just much easier for the service to work with. All lovely kind of mobile first design too. Won't dwell on this one, just to say we followed some really good solid principles around the information architecture and approaches to kind of content design and governance there. The service directory element, bit of a before and after snapshot here. Again, simplification of the design here, following some design patterns that you'll be quite familiar with if you've used pretty much any of the kind of central government services, or if you've interacted recently with some of the other kind of stuff like Airbnb and other things like that. We looked at design patterns that we knew worked well and kind of brought these into the service just to make it simpler, easier for people to interact with. So a bunch of features. There is a map view. I'll go back one. You can see it's actually hidden as default. There's a bit of an obsession with showing stuff on a map, and we didn't think it's actually that helpful. We found that these lists of things were easier for people to interact with, but there is a little toggle there that lets you switch a map on. So if you do need to see how close something is to you, that's a relatively straightforward thing for folks to do. You're able to kind of pin and save services. Importantly, you can suggest edits. So we create a nice feedback loop where members of the public can say, actually this service wasn't open today, or maybe the address is inaccurate, whatever it might be. That goes into a workflow in the back end system so that the owners of that service can make any amends that they need to. Inspiration, right? Here's where we stole design patterns from. We kind of worked with stuff we thought people would be familiar with and stuff that tested really well. Reuse some existing work. So there's stuff that we had done. In Buckinghamshire, we'd recently done some work on a social care directory. The supplier we work with, FutureGov, had also been doing work with other local authorities on creating these kind of local offer directory services as well. So we were able to combine a lot of really good experience and practice. We introduced some good, clear standards around our kind of designs, it's not quite a design system, but the design language and the design guidelines, making sure that these things are all, again, real focus on accessibility here. So thinking about color contrast properly, having some good options for kind of edge cases in the design as well. Again, following good standardized design patterns around how to make some of these things accessible by default as well. And applying some just nice universal design features. So the previous system had those slightly awkward accessibility features in the header, so you could kind of turn on different color contrasts and stuff like that. We got rid of all of that. We just built it with good, good clean kind of HTML, CSS standards, so that it just works with whatever tools our service users were working. So big improvement in terms of making it just easier for folks with access needs to kind of adjust it to their particular setup and just work with it the way they wanted to.
5 minutes, Ben.
Wicked. Okay. Yeah, thought quite carefully about how to make it easy on the location side as well. We shrunk the thing. We made it way smaller. So page sizes, huge reduction. Obviously, lovely kind of positive carbon impact here. We made it faster. We made it just perform better across the charts there. In terms of managing the services, again, really important focus on colleagues in the back end. So made it easier for kind of multi-user service management. So if you are the person who runs the service, you're able to update that data. But similarly, if you're an administrator in the team, you can update that data as well. So able to kind of let multiple people edit records to create a governance and workflow around that. Quite a carefully thought out set of features there to let people kind of edit and see histories of edits as well, so that we've got good governance and audit. In terms of the user interface for colleagues who are managing the system, huge improvements. You can see the kind of 80s style back office system in the background there, and how it looks today for people interacting with it. Yeah, nobody enjoys the change. It took a bit of getting used to, but it is much simpler, much easier to use. And again, any colleagues who join the service who have access needs are going to find this much easier to work with as well. Yeah, again, copying standard design patterns, stuff that we'd seen or worked with in various central government departments too. Finally, reporting and analyzing. So yeah, made it easy to pipe the data out into a kind of nice little cloud-based analytics tool called Metabase. You could switch that out if you want to use Power BI, if you want to use Tableau, whatever your thing is, very easy to do. You just hook up the API and kind of work with whatever service is best. Again, that was a bit of a conversation with the team who were used to having some built-in dashboarding services. We wanted to separate those concerns because we know that different teams will want to approach things in different ways. So just giving a bit of flexibility there. And here's some examples of some of the types of kind of reporting that could happen. Quite useful stuff, as I say, for our commissioners. We used a thing called Metabase. You could use something else. Finally, open data. We followed the data standard. So the work has happened with Open Referral and creating a kind of standardized approach to how we describe all the data that sits in these directories. We were working with this as this data standard was developing. So there were some complications in kind of being a very early pilot with this data standard. But super proud that we were able to do that and make this one of the first kind of services that adopted this particular data standard. Nicely described and kind of documented API on the service there as well. Yeah, I talked about this already. We really wanted to decouple a lot of the bits of this system to give flexibility and choice in the future. And some principles we work with as a team as well. So again, none of this will be new to a lot of folks on this call, but just being very clear about our guiding principles for how we designed and built this particular service. These were things we did actually come back to quite a lot with the team. It was a new way of working for them. And when things got difficult, hard conversations about why we were building one feature or not another, coming back to things that we had agreed at the start were quite often useful little touch points for the service. Won't dwell on a boring architecture slide. What needs to happen next? It's this really, isn't it? So it is a live operating service. The service needs to keep iterating, keep listening to their users, and keep kind of developing against this system as those needs change. There we go. That was quick. Sorry for being so fast, but I think I got through it all.
That's amazing. You were actually 1 minute 43 seconds under. So congratulations for that.
Magic.
That was fantastic, incredibly interesting. Ben, there are some questions for you in the chat. If you want
me to answer in the chat,
if you could respond in the chat, that would be perfect. For those people who've just joined, we've got quite a lot to get through, so we're going to do all the questions at the end. But please do use the chat, and then I'll take hands at the end. So we've got another 5 presentations to go. So I'm going to jump straight into the next one. Tony Evans, are you with us?
Yep. Just got to fight the PowerPoint to Google Meet fun. That one. Cool.
Thank you, Tony.
I'm presenting my screen. Awesome. I won't bother fighting the address bar, so you'll just see it in rough and ready mode. So I'm going to talk about co-designing a needs-based service directory with a load of our community partners and charity organizations. So there's a load of background about who we are. We're like nothing special, Cambridgeshire, bit deprived, bit affluent, bit rural, bit urban. And we got some funding from DLUC on the COVID digital sort of inclusion thing, pipeline to look at our sort of developing our thoughts around early prediction, early identification, prediction and prevention of people who are going to be in need later. So early indicators, and then trying to help create a holistic offer for them. So we think the impact of COVID will be like between 2021 and 2026, and there's going to be a whole load of people who have never previously been classed as vulnerable, and so don't have prior experience of how to interact with the public sector or the third sectors to gain support. So we want to try and hit them early so they don't sort of go on a downward trajectory to vastly increase costs. So the idea was we did a load of design sprints to try and take this conceptual model of how community groups, our residents, us, the district council and the county council could all interact together and work together to sort of like deliver this sort of intervention. And essentially the core of the app is a service directory. So this is sort of an alternative view on it. And this is how we ended up building a digital or designing the digital platform as a website with some content, some service finders, a service matching and rules engine that would then query a service directory. And then the interfaces for management of that service directory and the reporting for us to ideally track engagement and see if our services worked and see if our recommendation engine worked. So there's two steps there. Did we direct you to something useful? Was the thing helpful? And we wanted to be able to distinguish between rubbish services and rubbish recommendations from an analytics point of view. So we spend a lot of time talking about smarter searching. And most service directories are predicated on sort of some belief that you know what you need. Whereas we wanted to build a solution that was based on residents telling us what they knew. So their situation, their context, what's recently happened to them, and then us presuming we could infer from this the services that they might need. And we did this by looking at a bunch of vocabularies and taxonomies on like the LGA needs lists, the LGA personal circumstances list and the LGA service list to try and join up, like if you have this need or you've just encountered this circumstance, this is a service that might be helpful to you based on an indication of level of need. Like I'm feeling a bit poor is different to I literally cannot buy food, and we would then recommend different services based on this sort of thing. And then we conducted some user research to try and look at and work with people, our residents, and say, well, how would you like to tell us about yourself? How would you like to look for services? And we've published all of the user research outputs and finding out that actually the majority of people would tell us some things about themselves, not a lot, like order of 5 questions, and then we're bored. But that was, we felt, enough information to be able to provide decent service recommendations and also allow us to do the holistic wrap. So direct you towards a service that will help you today and direct you towards a service that means you won't need help tomorrow. You can see the outputs, and I'll share all the links. Either you can grab them from the deck or I'll put them in the chat. And then we did some user research on how to present back to people the services that we were recommending to them, and specifically how to present back to them the why we've made this recommendation. Most of the time when somebody searches, you don't have to tell them why the result's on the screen, because it's pretty obvious. I've searched for food, I've seen a food bank, I understand why this search gets this result. When we are sort of adding this needs model in and the service finder, we needed to explain to somebody why we think this service might be helpful, because it might not be obvious to them. So why are we recommending that they go to a CV writing club? Because you've got because you're needing a better job, that will help you balance your budget, which means you won't need to go to the food bank. So we had to do some research on this. And we also did some work with our charity and community sector partners on what are the next steps. So showing somebody a service is great. What you actually want them to do is engage with the service, and you want to make that process as painless as possible. So how can we improve the referral mechanism, and how can we specifically, there was a use case we didn't fully understand to start with, which was a lot of our charity organizations wanted to use this service finder to find services such that they could refer the people they were talking to. So they would encounter somebody, they would give them, like a food bank would give them a food parcel, but the food bank would also want to know how they could point them on. So it's actually the charities and the third sectors were wanting to provide more holistic services, and they needed the information to do so. And then that meant we wanted a better way of doing referrals, and then a better way of tracking if people went. So when we gave a recommendation, did they take it? If they take it, did it work? And then try and ideally cross-correlate who you are and your circumstances with when you went to this service, did it help you? So we could then tailor and improve what we were recommending and improve our commissioning in the charity and third sector within the space. Most of what I've said is summarized in a lot of longer documents. I will end there with that, blast through it, and then I'll just watch chat and take questions. Because then this probably gives us more time for later.
Okay, thanks very much, Tony. I think we're going to leave all the questions until the end, if that's okay. Just because I'm worried if we start, we might end up in a conversation that takes quite a long time. So if it's okay,
yeah, of course.
Obviously use the chat, guys. But I think we'll move on to the next presentation if that's all right, because I don't want to get stuck in a long conversation. And next up is Alex from Greenwich talking about their vision for a community directory and their discovery plan. Are you with us, Alex?
I am. Hello.
Morning, Alex.
Morning. Let me just see if I can share everything. Okay. Can you see those slides in the normal slide view?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name's Alex, and I'm a product manager at Royal Greenwich. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our vision for rebuilding our directory and a bit about how we're going to approach our discovery phase, which we've just kicked off. I'm also going to end by sharing some of our thoughts on maybe the different routes that we could go down. Really early thoughts, they're not very well formed at all, but hopefully it can stimulate some good discussion. So I am one member of this lovely team, which is working on our directory project at Greenwich, and a few of us are on the call today. So we're a blended team from across the whole council. We have people from adults, public health and children's, and then a bunch of us from the digital team as well. And we have a mission to design a reusable community directory product that does two things, that makes local information, advice and services more accessible, intuitive and easy to navigate for residents, and also creates a more sustainable and devolved way to publish and update content for all organisations and service providers involved. So one thing we're quite aware of is that we know residents don't often think to look at an online directory, and they're much more likely to search based on what their need is. So we really want to explore how we can get information in front of the right people at the right time and the different ways that we could be doing that. As part of delivering our mission, we want to do these four things. So first is to build on any existing product standards and insights that have already been done to really accelerate our work. So we're looking quite a lot at the moment at things such as Scout, Outpost, Open Referral UK, and obviously LocalGov Drupal, and trying to reuse any insights from other local authorities as well. So the last month for us has been super busy trying to speak to different councils and learn about the work that they've done. We also want to build an open source API-driven product because our assumption is that this will help other people adopt the product that we build if they want to use it as well, but definitely something we'll need to validate further down the line. We want to continue to co-invest in a product team to continue to support and maintain whatever we build. And then finally, we want to help other organizations on their adoption journey if they would like to reuse the product that we've built. And this could be through the choices that we make with our engineering. It could be sharing things like code libraries or design systems, but also hopefully just by working in the open, which we're trying to do as much as possible. I'm not sure if everyone will be familiar with the Agile delivery process from the gov.uk service manual, but I'll just touch on it lightly. So there are 3 key phases to our project, which are discovery, alpha, and beta, before we move into having a live service. Right now, we're in discovery, which is that time for us to really understand the problem space before we create or change anything to do with our directory. The next stage, the alpha stage, is where we'll test out different solutions to our problems so we can get a better idea of what does and doesn't work. And then finally, we'll move into beta, which is where we can build, refine, and improve the service, so able to meet the different needs of our users. And we're very lucky that the beta part of our project has been funded by the Local Digital Fund. So very excited to be working with them on that part of our project. And so to talk a bit about how we're approaching our discovery phase, we've kicked off with 6 weeks of really quite broad research where we're trying to zoom out and understand the context behind our directory. I think because the digital team is very new, so lots of us are new to working at Greenwich and with the community directory, we thought it would be very easy to look at the wrong problem to begin with. So we really wanted to carve out some time for us to understand the context before diving into a specific problem area. So right now we're coming to the end of this phase of broad research. So over the last month or so, we've been really, really busy learning about what the community directory is, who uses it, and how it fits into the rest of the work that the council does. And you can see here the 10 objectives we set ourselves for this phase, which was really just to give us some structure and make it quite clear when we'd get to the end point of this part of our discovery. And what worked quite nicely for us was that we could group those objectives into some common themes, which have sort of acted as mini work streams for us to organize ourselves around. And every one of these has a lead within the team, but different people are working on the actual work. And if you'd like to hear some of our early insights, we did a show and tell yesterday, which we have a recording of. So do hit us up after if you'd like to understand a bit about what we're learning under each of these areas. And so once we've done this initial 6 weeks of broad research, which in theory we're wrapping up tomorrow, we're going to move into the second part of our discovery where we're trying to look at a specific service area. Our theory here is that we'll be looking to understand the specific needs, pain points, and desires of the users that interact with a specific service so we can understand what role the community directory should play in their journey. Then looking a bit further ahead, we will get to a point where we've surfaced different opportunities from that research and have some assumptions about how we could address them. And rather than sitting on those insights and moving to do discovery on another service area, what we want to do is move into testing those assumptions up front to help us get rid of ideas that are bad and increase our confidence in others. And so we can slowly start to build that picture of what the community directory should and shouldn't do. We'll obviously need to look at other service areas as well. So that might mean that we're going to end up kind of switching in between discovery and alpha in this loop. But our theory is that we can learn much faster about what does and doesn't work for community directory if we do that than if we were to just do one big broad discovery up front. So this is kind of a work in progress, this approach. Next week is when we're going to decide what we move on to focus for our discovery. So we'll be very happy to share what we choose to go for and how that pans out when we actually get to it. So what we wanted to do, given that you're all here, was kind of share something that's on our minds to try and stimulate a bit of discussion. It's a bit of our kind of moonshot thinking, so it's very unstructured. But we thought it would be a nice forum to kind of share some of our early thoughts and get some feedback. So from all of the work that we've done, one of our assumptions is that we should treat our directory not as one large product, but as a collection of smaller products that are joined together. and very similar to the approach that Ben outlined at the beginning. So rather than having one directory which tries to be the front-end product, which our residents see, a database of service listings that we use, and also an area for service providers to log into to manage their listings, we should break those apart into smaller products that we solve as problems independently. But that got us thinking about how far we could push that idea. And so we've got some different options that we're going to talk through, which, as I said, are super unstructured, and we haven't really thought them through that much. So if you do have questions, I can't guarantee I can answer them, but we'll share them with you anyway. So our first thought is that we could take quite the straightforward route of rebuilding our directory in a more modern way, where we split it into those smaller products as I described. So on the left-hand side, we have a local service provider in Greenwich who is able to access some sort of portal thing where they can manage their listings for the directory, and that's a product in itself that we manage. We then use that to upload the information to some sort of central database of local services that we do in a consistent way, our assumption being that we'd use the Open Referral UK data standard to do that. That data we can then surface in our front-end directory, which we can rebuild and redesign in a way that better meets user needs. And we've already found lots of insights about how we can better share that content to make it easier for residents to look at. So this is kind of probably a straightforward approach that would make quite a lot of sense for us to look into. The second approach is trying to push that idea slightly further and thinking about that database of local services as a platform that can support many different front-end products. So as I said at the beginning, we know lots of people don't think to look at a community directory. So we need to ask ourselves to what extent that should be the front-end solution that people interact with. So let's say hypothetically that we found an opportunity to create a new service, perhaps one that helps parents and carers find a childminder. Then we could use that same data from this database of local services to power that, which would really help us be a bit more efficient with how we build our products. And this is an approach that we've heard lots of local authorities talk about. And I know that I think Dorset and Somerset were both on our show and tell yesterday and mentioned that this is something they're thinking about as well. This feels like a kind of more user-led approach by thinking about the actual kind of service journeys that people need to go through on the front end. But then that got us thinking again, if lots of local authorities are thinking about doing this, is there an advantage to starting to share some of that technology rather than duplicating it?
5 minutes, Alex.
Thank you. This is the last slide. So our idea potentially could be that in theory, we could all kind of share this local services directory database that everyone can use. So on the left-hand side, now we have a service provider anywhere in the UK, and they're able to access this portal thing to manage their listings, and that gets shared to this central database for the whole country. And that's, again, stored in a consistent way, which should be Open Referral UK. And then that data could be used to serve products, services across the entire country. So I've put at the top like our Greenwich product ecosystem. We could pull from this place, and then hypothetically East Devon and Tower Hamlets I've pulled out as well, because that's where my parents and I live respectively. So the idea here is it could be cheaper and faster for other local authorities to improve their offering around local services and finding local services if we all shared the same technology. This is probably, lots of complexities that would be involved in this, but it's something that we spoke about as a team early this week. And as I said, part of our moonshot thinking, we don't really know what it means. It might be completely unfeasible, but we thought this was an interesting forum for us to put out there and just see what other people think. So let me know in the chat and we can talk about it later on.
That's absolutely brilliant, Alex. Thanks very much, and thanks for keeping to time. Thanks for everyone to keeping to time. That's a new one on me. Brilliant, thank you. Will, you're up next. Will from LocalGov Drupal.
Yeah, we'll soon sort that keeping to time nonsense.
You're so cheeky.
Let me see if I can find the presentation.
Are you? I'm next, Neil.
Yeah, Will's next. Sorry.
Sorry.
Will is up next.
Go for it.
I don't mind if you want to go first. I've not got any slides, and some people have asked for them. So what I'll do is make a document with these links in, or we'll write a blog post about it that you can go look. This is all fantastic, and I hope we do more of these sort of grand show and tells. We're all showing our ideas, because I've got loads of food for thought already. So thank you. We're LocalGov Drupal. We're 24 councils and counting around the country. If you go to our website, you'll see some of those. In fact, I'll show you some of those. Here we go. So I'm just going to sort of take a little bit of a trip down memory lane, because directories have been a sort of challenge and an interest of mine for a few years. And it actually started when I was working at Brighton. So this is like 2016, 2017. And we had a lot of the products. I think, Ben, you had screenshots of the products that we were trying to get rid of. I won't mention their names, but they really didn't do their job. They were hard to use. The data wasn't presented where citizens, residents really needed it, in a kind of unstructured, dreadful way. So we were very lucky to be given some cash to build our own in Drupal, and this is kind of where LocalGov Drupal started. We had a clean sheet of paper to do it. So what I'm showing you now is just some sort of prototypes that our designer Dave did at the time. You know, that there would be a map, an optional map you can show and hide. You could do a location search. You can sort of drill down in an e-commerce style to find the information that you needed. And the idea was that, you know, in Brighton at the time, we had a kind of cohort of really good content designers. We were very lucky to have that. And what we wanted to do is just give them more power to their elbow. So, you know, as much of this that could be created and built by content designers and managed by them, that was kind of the idea. So, you know, fast forward to today. Oh, in fact, sorry, just riffing on Ben's point, you know, this finder pattern that GovUK has, it's become kind of all conquering. We're using it as well. It's actually testing very well locally. So, you know, I think there are iterations we can make on this for a kind of directory kind of pattern, but it's doing okay. It's doing the job. So we're pretty happy with it. So sort of fast forwarding to today, really, this directory product in LocalGov Drupal is being used in lots of different places. Here's an example from Croydon where you can pretty much put anything into it. A content designer can say, I want to make a parks and playgrounds directory, and I want these facets or these categories down the left-hand side. I can just create these on the fly. I can kind of group them how I want. I can make this today. And in fact, this was made over a couple of days. Ben, the lead content designer there, and me and a few other content designers, we just decided to make it, and we made it. And I think that's how this stuff should be. You should be able to react to the needs that are in front of you. And interestingly, you know, other councils have done this too. So this is Bath and North East Somerset, who've just joined LocalGov Drupal. We didn't even know they were doing this. They just took the code from GitHub and just went and built this, and turned up with a link saying, hello, here's some things that we've done. So, you know, the fact that not just LocalGov Drupal, but all of our stuff is on GitHub and it's shareable, I think it's a sight to see, and we really should sort of continue with this, because you never know what you're going to get, you know, when that's done. Let me just tell you a bit about what the Drupal directory stuff does. So you can go to our demo site at demo.localgovdrupal.org, and then scroll down the home page. There's a link that says directories. Just click on that and you get to the page that I'm showing you now. I'll just hide some of these. So on the demo site, there are little banners here, alert banners telling you what the formats are in case you don't know. So this is a directory channel. It's the stuff that I've just shown you already, with a search, with the ability to add content and facets down this side. And if you look at how this is managed, it's all very standard stuff. So a content designer can create a channel that can enable specific facets. I'll show you how to set up facets in a second at a channel level, and then pick the content types that they want to see. And then in terms of creating facets, the categories, you can create facet types, which are kind of the buckets in which, you know, facets live. So let's say I want to create a new facet type like park facilities. So I've done that. And then in that section, I've created all the things you'd expect to see in a park, like I don't know, swings, football pitches, tennis courts, all of that kind of stuff. We wanted it so that content designers could just say, okay, I'm going to design this today and I'm going to build it today. I will be able to iterate on this myself without getting a dev involved. I can just do it all myself, which is great. The other thing that we're really pleased of in LocalGov Drupal, and Eeks, one of our developers will tell you about it in a second, is that we've got a component or a part of LocalGov Drupal called Geo or Geos. And it's basically a list of pins and GeoJSON or other area files that you can use anywhere in the product. And I imagine this could be used by other products too. But if you look at a particular, let's look at a particular venue like the Brecon Beacons, this is like the area file that is shown on a map. You can go edit that if you want to. You can change the values here, or you can just go get a new one. So I could create a new area by uploading a file from one of the council's mapping systems or from somewhere else, or I can add a new address, or I can search for. If I can type, don't ever do a live demo. I can search for a thing that I've already got, and then I would publish that, and you would see what I've just shown you. So it's in the power of the content designer to create what they really want. Open Referral is really interesting, and it's come up a couple of times today. And this is something that we really believe in as a group of councils. It's a great piece of work. It's long overdue, and Ben and Ada and Worthing, other councils who are involved in that, did a fantastic job. I am not an expert on Open Referral, I must say. This is a blog post on our website, which I'll send you a link to. And as a product manager, I can probably get to about here. And then where it says getting technical, that's where I stop understanding how this really works. But happily, Eeks is the developer that did all this work for us. Do you want to give us a few words, Eeks? And if you want to show anything,
yeah, I'll just steal the screen from you for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
If it will let me. There we go. Share. So what's kind of been described about the directory is the way that it's developed, and it's super flexible. So the directory actually just comes with a kind of a standard venue or something, even without a location on it, and just a set of fields and some choice of facets that you can add to it, and it can be very content designer driven. But it's completely flexible, so you can make your own. So these are the standard fields on a standard page, but I've just pulled together one which is simpler, which I've called FID entry, and I've just plugged it together so any sort of website builder can build a new type of directory entry. In this case, what's different is I've added the Local Government Association ESD needs taxonomy. So you can also have a fixed taxonomy that's, nationally defined, and then you'd have an entry like this. But that leads to a little problem to make it fit with the Open Referral standard, which you've seen this graph before. So it says how the things map up together. So we have services with particular fields on them and things like that. So we've tried to make it much easier for the person who's clicking together the directory. So it's kind of different from Ben's thing, where they could actually work with, and the internal model kind of fits the Open Referral standard. With this allows you to fit the data that you're importing or you're typing into the site and displaying within the directory to then fit it to the Open Referral on the way out. So there's a set of mappings, and we made it so that this is the one I've just created, the FID entry. It's a service, and I can just populate the mappings, and it will fit my field ESD need, which was new, to the service taxonomies that is the standard for going out with Open Referral. And that way we can make it much easier to output the information in the standard that could then be consumed by the suggested national hub, because it would be able to read knowing that what my needs taxonomy is when it goes out, basically. So yeah, that's sort of high level, how we can share data but still have a flexible model inside the directories.
Yeah, because there's a tension between content designers understanding the standard and being able to write to that standard, which is quite hard and time consuming, versus getting something out the door, and maybe the data isn't in a form, it's not being written like that necessarily. So it's trying to marry those two. Is that right, or have I just confused it?
No, that's pretty much it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we've got, Open Referral gives you need a standardized way of having the conversation between machines. But when you're doing content designers and models like that, and displaying it, it's human beings who are looking at it. So it's a different market, a different model. So this is a way of gelling the two together, basically.
Brilliant. I'll finish off. Thank you, Eats. Just in terms of where we're heading, I think as sort of the LocalGov Drupal Directories products, and it very much chimes in with what you're talking about, which is, I really like the Greenwich work where you basically said, well, what are directories for, and who are they for, and what journeys they really want to do. And I think we'd love to see more examples of this product and other products being used in compelling ways. Because I mean, in Brighton, we started with trying to fix a technology problem, which isn't the right place to start. It's actually, let's get these things out in the wild and think more deeply about what users really need. With that in mind, I think a lot of this is around, obviously getting data into LocalGov Drupal so content designers can manage it and make it, accurate and shareable. But actually, it's really about getting, as other people have said, it's getting this data in front of users in a place where they actually want it. Because who is coming to a council website to look at the directories? Not that many people, actually. So we'd support any moves to really share this data out, more widely, so it kind of sits where users are looking. And there's a couple of other things that we were looking at as well. The technology we've got is very much based on a central team of content designers who are kind of all at the same level. They all do it together. They kind of trust each other and they're working to a particular standard. I'm very interested in examples of people that, where this has been handed out to a third party to do. And there was an example of that in Brighton, but which we never really got to. So, how do you do that effectively and well? And how do you invite service providers to update their own records? How do you do that well? I'm interested in both of those things, and we've not really explored it very much yet as LocalGov Drupal. And I guess the final thing, which was a bit of a curveball thrown to me the other day, I was talking to a planning team. They're going, "Oh, this is all very interesting. How could we use this in our local plan?" To which I thought, well, I don't know actually how you would use it. So I think the sky's the limit here, to be honest. And it's good having a session like this to kick ideas around, and I hope we have another one. But for now, that's us.
Thanks very much, Will. So two things from me. First, just one thing on our product roadmap at LGD. Directories is one of the things in there, and we're hoping to kick off some working groups sort of early this year. It'll probably be February or March now. So, watch this space, and we'll try and let people who are in this group know in various ways. The second thing is, before we have the next presentation, because we've made some time, I'm aware like 2 hours is a long time to sit in front of Zoom. I'd like, or Google Meet, let's have a 2-minute break. And when I say break, let's have an actual break. So no checking emails, no going on Slack. Have a walk around your kitchen or your living room. Go and feed the dog, and we'll come back in 2 minutes. Is that okay? We all get a break from our screens, and then we'll jump straight into the next one. So 2 minutes, and I'm timing it, and we'll start promptly. Thank you. It was described as glorious by Ben. There you go. No higher praise, I think. That's your 2 minutes, guys. I can see some empty seats, which is good because people did actually go for a walk round. So I'm hoping people are refreshed after their walk round. And I guess it depends how long it takes people's kettles to boil. But there we go. If we could mute mics when we're not talking, that would be good, I think. Sounds like someone's asleep. or worse. I'm not sure. Do we have Neil Laurence? Neil, are you back?
I'm back.
Brilliant. That's great. I think we should restart. Would you? I think I can see most people back now for the people who I've got in screen. I'm going to take that as it being the majority. So Neil, would you like to start on your Dorset update?
I will. If
Thank
I
you
can
very
just
much.
get this running. Cool. Okay. This is supposedly entitled Directories, a Dorset-wide approach, but what it should really be is a subtitle of, oh Christ, something's not working. What the hell do we do about it? So we're not at the stage where we have a product. We just have a bunch of thoughts and some information, and that's what I'm going to show you today, which isn't as comprehensive as the work that Greenwich are doing, but might be just another perspective. So we use multiple community directories, and Will said something really useful just then, which was about third parties, and we do have a couple that are in the hands of third parties, namely the last one around, well, you can see what the state of it is, which is great that someone's out there wanting to do something for us, but the presentation is a little alarming. So one of the things we are looking at is what that model might be. So the stuff I'm going to talk about today is just around the Our Dorset directory, which is our adult services directory. Quite small, but we did a bit of a deep dive on this because we were looking to move away from a joint CMS directory platform and back to our main website. Right, so what's on it? God, it's really slow, this thing. So a batch of entries and alarmingly 238 possible categories, which really alarmed us. But having said that, only 8 of them you can actually see and choose from. The impact of this is people get an enormous long list to choose from, which really doesn't work on a mobile device. Some categories have hardly anything in them, and the things that are important to people don't really match the categories or entries. So categories and taxonomies have come up a bit today, and I'm really leaning towards this idea of needs as a thing as a result of that. So we're really looking at, is there just too much on here? This is just for adults. Is it aimed at what people really want? How do we actually curate this? How do we make that journey possible for people? Why are there so many categories, and are they the right ones? I think we're pretty much leveling on they're not. How things are updated is one that's really been bothering us. So it's a very manual process. There's usually, with these directories, there's either 1 or 2 people looking after the whole thing, which is a miserable thing to do. In the last batch, of that 1,300, we looked at 700 entries, and 28% of them, we found nothing was happening anymore. Things had gone, and others we just didn't get any response at all. So one of the things we're thinking about is it better to have wrong content or no content? I think there's a pretty clear answer to that one. But who keeps content up to date? And are there ways we can automate this to make it better, so that we can make sure what we do have on there is current? In terms of how people were finding content, a very small amount of entries were appearing. Very few were sort of top 10. Some only got 1 or 2 hits. We were finding that people were scrolling up and down search results, completely overwhelmed by what they were seeing. And here's an example of why. I mean, what do you do with community angels? That's obviously a content issue. We've not described what that is very well, but that's probably part of it. And in common to other councils that have talked today, colleagues aren't finding what's on there useful at all, and that's a quote from one of our colleagues in our customer service team. I can't use this to help people, which is kind of alarming. So are we helping users find what they need, and can we do more to guide them to results? So this idea of one big bucket with everything in, and then you can use filters or facets to sort yourself out, it's just not hanging together for us. More fundamentally, do people actually understand what a directory is for? We've been asking them that question, and they said it sounds like a good thing, but the idea of calling it a directory is even maybe the wrong thing. And is it just too hard to use? And I think we're finding it might be with what we have with this particular one. When we've talked to other organizations, particularly technology providers, governance comes across really strongly. So we've been told there's 3 roles: who actually gets the data, who validates it, and who publishes it. So the collector can actually be a self-serve. We can have people updating their own. There's a couple of software products that allow you to do that. But then this idea of validating is really important. Does it match the categories properly? Is it relevant? Is it a 3-page spiel about a childminder, or is it 2 lines about a really, really important service that isn't doing the right job? And who actually publishes the stuff? What court does that fit in? Is it a third party? Is it us? There is a bit of a strong desire within the council to outsource the whole thing to a third part, to third sector, and say, here you go, you manage it for us. I'm not sure we can do that with any great confidence at this point. And there was this idea of a local assurance policy to help those discussions, to make sure that what is published actually fits with what the needs are. So we're looking at who should have each role, and how do we determine a local policy on assurance. So we've also talked to stakeholders within the council about directories. They all got terribly excited, lots and lots of stuff and cards being put up, some quite alarming. But what we've done is try to sort of draw together what we learned from deep diving into how people are using the directory, along with what our stakeholders are saying, and try to put together what kind of things we think are the way to go. We think updating a community directory is difficult. We think bad information is worse than no information. We need to find the resources to do this stuff properly, but we want to use this idea of self-serve, and the automation idea is really appealing, but I don't think there are many products that do that yet. We definitely want to make it easier to use. And we want to do more with co-design. That's something that's come from stakeholders internally. We don't want just to plonk them a common pattern and say, there it is. We want to do some co-production on very specific things. We'd like to do some testing with users to learn where we can make it better. And we want it to be used for internal users as well as the public. So that would get around some of those issues too. And searching and filtering. This idea of one big bucket is one that worries us. We've been doing some work lately on content where we're curating that journey. So we push people at a limited number of results on the directory where we can. Lunch clubs is the best one. You couldn't get 100 results if you're not careful. And some of them got nothing to do with lunch clubs. So we're also looking at this idea of personalization, and the stuff coming up today about needs has got me really excited, because that fits with what the white paper is saying about what we should be doing for people using these services. So the idea of switching to that taxonomy feels like a good fit. And we want the categories presented to users to make sense. So if we did move away from our huge number to something that is around, I've got a problem with, then I could see that working. I'm worried about duplication. We've got a batch of directories out there. We think the way to go, and this is really interesting how Greenwich are doing this thinking too. We think we need one big back-end directory that stores efficiently, but a number of different front ends to help remove data, allow us to do that kind of tailored design to suit the needs of a group, and try and reduce the number of entries at any one time just by subsets of the whole data. And we definitely need to think about how we look at governance, validating entries, and who is doing the whole job. And sharing data, yeah, everyone's on board with open referral, so we definitely want to do that. And we did like the idea of the Ofsted data being used and brought in as that extra sign of validation. So where we are at the moment, we've got a batch of stuff. We wanted to start the next phase of work by looking at what the problem statements are. We want to test those with our stakeholders, and with all the conversation and work going on, we really want to soak in what everyone else is doing. So I am designated sponge at the moment for sitting in on show and shares and hearing what's going on. And that's it.
Brilliant, thank you. Again under time. I think there's quite a conversation going in on in the chat, Neil. So you might want to have a look at some of that. So thanks for that. So the final presentation before we move on to the Q&A, and it's Keelan from Essex. Are you here with us?
Yes, I am here. Hello.
With your fantastic audio setup, go for it.
Oh, I'll try and hide my fantastic. So I'm actually not just Keelan, I'm actually Nick and James as well. Nick, James, do you want to give a wave to the camera as well? So we're doing we're going to share out some of this here. Nick, do you want to share slides or shall I?
You go for it, Keelan.
That was me. That was me. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second to attempt to do that. Right. So great to be able to chat to you all about some of the work that we've been doing at our local offers. So hopefully there's a lot actually that's quite similar with things that we've talked about before, but hopefully there's a few different things and a few sort of nuances of the work we were doing. Just to give you very brief context about us, so we're Essex County Council, we're an upper tier local authority, so we do social care and we don't pick up the bins, is the simple kind of explanation of that. Population's about 1.5 million, we cover a really large area as well, a mix of urban and rural, and there's about 8,000 of us in the organisation. And I, along with my colleagues Nick and James, work on the service transformation team. So I've been around for a couple of years and sort of try and cover off most of those sort of roles on the digital multidisciplinary team.
Have we lost? Has everyone else lost Keelan or just me?
No, I think we have.
You want to
lost him.
Oh, is he back? Keelan, was that you?
After I commented on his excellent audio, it's failed. I should have kept my mouth shut. Curse of the commentator, wasn't it? Can you pick it up, Nick?
Yeah, I certainly can do. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks very much.
How far?
Sorry, Chrome said that I'm out of memory, so it might be best if Nick.
Do you want to? I know you're back, Keelan. Do you want to crack on? And if it drops again, I'll pick it up.
Okay, I'll. It's now telling me that I can take over from myself as presenter. That is weird. So sorry about that. Anyway, as I was saying, so we've got. We'll wait for the slides to appear again. Just hope it doesn't crash. So yeah, we're sort of responsible for our main website, essex.gov.uk, and a few other things, but we also sort of work quite closely supporting the rest of the council to deliver some other products like this one. So background, basically, we've got an existing local offer site, and it's not really meeting needs, essentially. So we had a local area inspection back in 2019, which raised some issues with the current site. You can see on the right-hand side the visual design, accessibility, way content is structured, and even just the reliability, to be honest, of the site is pretty poor. So we knew that was something we needed to do about this specific directory and set of content for the which is specifically around the local offer for special educational needs and disabilities. And that's sort of the reason why we've looked at this in particular. And then last year, towards the end of last year, we took about 3 months just carrying out a discovery and an alpha, and we did that mainly with a sort of in-house team that we had. I'm going to touch briefly on sort of high level what we found, and then Nick and James are going to go through some of the more detailed things that we learned through that process. So along the way, we spoke to lots of people. So as many others will have said, I won't go into the kind of complexity of the environment that we're in, but between the council, wider organizations, as well as young people themselves and their families, we tried out some prototypes. We explored some of the technology that we could use, and we sort of culminated in taking some recommendations to be able to get funding for the next stages. And what will those next stages be? Well, it's not just a directory. So we start off kind of thinking about a hub for information. We know that there needs to be something of a dedicated sort of area for the send local offer, but we're keen to bring this much closer to our wider essex.gov.uk site rather than it being isolated somewhere separately. There's a lot that we can do in terms of making that information better organized. And there's a lot here that guides people through some really quite complex processes around accessing support, whether that's around things like education, health and care plans, or other things that are required to kind of access some of those services. So we think we can do a really good job here. And accessibility as well. So again, a main weakness of the existing site where we can improve, and by leveraging some of the good practice that we have across the rest of the web estates, that makes that quite a bit easier. And then there's a directory of services. So there are a substantial number of listings on the site. I think it's about 375. We can do a lot here in terms of improving the user experience. and really allowing people to filter a lot more and get a closer kind of a match of the services that we present to them relative to what they're actually looking for. So I'm going to pass on to Nick, who's going to talk a bit more about some of the prototyping that we did.
Thanks, Keelan. I'll give you this symbol to move the slide, if that's all right. So if we can just go to the next one, that'd be great. So I'm going to talk a little bit around some of the detailed user testing that we did here. So we've heard a lot this morning around some of these similar principles. Having recently taken this out and testing it, hopefully there's some useful insights here that are relevant to most of the audience. So our kind of first round of prototyping was done, and we tested this with a number of different users and user groups. And we wanted to understand people's reactions to what's currently a standalone local offer moving into that essex.gov.uk sort of ecosystem from there. So what did people feel was, or did people feel that was better, or did they have concerns about kind of seeing what's traditionally been a standalone site as part of the wider council branding? So we wanted to understand what people really valued when they were searching for information, and that journey that again we've touched on a couple of times this morning around navigating between the flat content, the information that helps them to understand their circumstances and the things that they might need and the journey that they're on, and then actually finding those local services via something like a directory from there. So in our first iteration, we weren't looking at the content in great detail or the taxonomy, although that's work that we're subsequently picking up and continuing to work on, as you would have seen in the chat here. And we tested this with a couple of scenario tasks. Once again, one or two of the existing service directories that exist out there, and also against some prototypes that we pulled together from some of our initial research that we've done with our working group. If we can move to the next slide, please, Keelan. So some of the feedback that we got generally in Essex, people weren't overly concerned. They weren't put off necessarily by the council branding on the local offer. Sort of logically, people were more concerned about the content itself and whether that was useful, which we found quite reassuring, and we were pleased to hear that. But there was definitely this trust question that we've touched on a couple of times this morning, and we got a definite sense that if people try and use a service, so with our existing local offer, we definitely heard that people who'd tried and failed to use it because the user journey was poor wouldn't go back, wouldn't return to it from there. So trust is something that forms over time and in interactions that people have. We think because content standards are good in our essex.gov.uk wider ecosystem, that may help to reassure people and help people to build that trust. We looked a little at the colour and the imagery, and there was definitely some concerns. I think Ben touched on this earlier, that our standard corporate styles weren't necessarily user-friendly enough for this audience of people who are definitely not looking for corporate information. They're looking for human information that helps them understand where they are in their journey from there. So we've taken those on board, and we're thinking about what we might do with that to kind of find just enough imagery and styling to make people feel like the content is welcoming as well. Large bodies of text was something that came up. So what we picked up from all of our user research is just how time stretched and time poor these families are often dealing with really stressful situations. So being able to break up the text into manageable chunks and making sure that that we're using imagery in a really helpful way to help people find what they're looking for quickly and easily was a really key insight that we got during that early testing. If we can move to the next slide, please, Keelan. So around searching, we found that people were generally browsing. So a number of users and the users that we spoke to, some had experience with utilising the local offer before. Some were relatively new to their send journey. So we found that people are definitely browsing. They don't necessarily know what they're looking for until they find it from there. So we need to think about how we order things and the categories that we use to help people to find it. I'll talk a little bit more about language in a second. And on a directory side of things, we saw that lots of people were searching by geographical location. But we did pick up that people would be willing to travel for the right service. So actually helping people to look at what's in their local area, but also for some quite specific searches for around the needs, around the types of services and availability that were available from there were really valued by users. We had an insight around maps not being useful. We only tested sites and prototypes with maps on them. We think this is an interesting area, and we'll continue to be looking and testing that as we move forwards. If we could jump to the next slide, please. So navigating, we found that most users were able to navigate fairly seamlessly between our flat content, our information content, and our directory service searches. From there, people relied on breadcrumbs to get backwards and forwards. So as long as we are structuring the information in logical ways and thinking about that consistency across those sites, hopefully that's really valuable and a really useful insight, and means that we can continue to kind of work forward in the direction that our early assumptions had taken us in, which was good. And then the final slide on this little section is just around language. So I mentioned earlier from here, we definitely heard lots from our users around the tone that we were using, and so we need to think about that in terms of our taxonomy and the way that we describe the categories. We also need to think about this just in the way that we talk about all of these things. So I think we'd seen some of our prototypes had kind of getting started with send, and we were hearing from some users that even that is a level of terminology that people don't always recognize at the start of their journey, and something about their child having difficulties would be a more meaningful starting point from there. So some really great insights from users on our first round of testing from there. And I'm just going to pass over to James now, hopefully, who's going to pick up, talk a little bit about smart answers.
Thanks, Nick. So running with that thread of a lot of our users not being brand new to send and that being quite unfamiliar to them, one potential thing we wanted to test was using smart answers. We saw that Kent were using something like this. So if we jump into the next slide, please. So we were thinking, first we need to know where to actually direct the people using these smart answers. So with the local office space, it's really confusing for parents. And it was even confusing for us. We had to speak to a lot of different send teams to understand where people were supposed to be going and where people were ending up at contact centres when they shouldn't be. So we wanted to trial this kind of smart answers tool. We first were seeing if people would navigate there naturally from the homepage. Was there value in the outcomes that were outputted from this tool? Excuse me, and was the language content clear? So we used like a type form survey just for ease of being able to edit the questions. We ran that through a few professional teams to ensure that it made sense from their end in terms of where we were sending people. And then we tried testing it with families who had little send knowledge. We looked first at a prototype homepage and then saw how they navigated through the type form prototype. So if we jump through to the next one, please, Keelan. So yeah, it would look something like this. With a few questions and then a suggested next steps, giving a few different options. If we jump next into the feedback. So starting from the homepage, generally with the content they found a lot of it was focused on education, partly because it's send. There was a bit of use of images and colour, which made it feel friendlier than a government website. And we wanted people, the scenario they were given, it was if they were brand new to send and they just had some concerns, where would they look? So we were trying a couple of categories like my child has difficulties or general support for parents. And that's where they would get through to the smart answers. And people would generally said they were looking for help identifying if their child has send. That's something we were a bit concerned about because we don't want to give any kind of diagnosis tool. That's not what we can offer. So something to consider. People were just also general advice on how to support their child better. So if we jump through to the next one. So getting into the actual smart answers form itself. So people found the questions what they expected to be asked. One area of concern was the first filter question asked what is your primary concern, whether that's behaviour or another area. And what we found is with a lot of children, they might have several concerns. So that might not quite work as a solution. Generally, people found the outcomes logical that they got through, and they found having an outcome reassuring. And maybe a bit of feedback was in the output, there was a lot of different information, and people found that quite overwhelming to take in. So they wanted to know, could they have that emailed to them, or is there a way they can record that?
Sorry, James, 2 minutes, please.
Okay, almost done. If we jump to the next. Yeah, and as I said, a lot of people are brand new to send, so we need to be careful on the language. Some of the health stuff could be too general. Families early in the process might not want to be labelled as send, or find it that a big jump. Overall, something we're testing, but not 100% the solution. We jump to the next bit. So, Keelan.
This is back to me. So I'll just very briefly touch on stuff we're looking at next. So things that are still open questions for us. Location-based search, how do we manage that? How do we make sure that meets people's needs? How people want to filter and interact with directory. Thinking around duplicate data, directory entries, and how we manage data quality on things like that. And then a lot of work, to be honest, the bulk of the work on sort of page-by-page content rewrites on a lot of the flat content. And we're sort of roughly in this kind of procurement stage at the moment, and hopefully in the summer, hopefully in time for the new academic year, in September, we'll have a much better local offer to share with everybody. And hopefully that's just give a bit of an insight of how directories fit in with a wider sort of set of content as well, and things like that. And I'll hand back over the stage.
Thanks very much, Keelan, James, and Nicholas for that. So that's all the presentation. So thanks to everyone that's done one, and thanks to everyone who's been putting in comments, etc. So at the bottom of the screen, you should have a little raise your hand icon, and we'll have a bit of an unstructured discussion, so people can just throw out comments, questions, ideas. So if anyone who wants to say anything, hit the raise hand button. That would be great, and we can start the conversation. No, nothing. There we go. Andy Broomfield.
Hey, I'm Andy, by the way, developer at Brighton and Hove. I'll lower the hand now because Google Meet reminded me. Yeah, that Smart Answers is quite interesting. Is that actually being powered by the directory's content, or are you using something like a custom entity or something in terms of powering the tech? And are you sort of using multiple questions to begin with to like apply a filter or something?
Yeah, so Andy, great question. I think it's fair to say we're probably not at the point yet of technical implementation. So we just literally in this stage tested some prototypes, and as James said, we did that just using Typeform first of all, and then just some Figma prototypes. So I don't know what that will look like. I think though in general, it's probably more around some of the kind of processes and some of the more specific services, like there's maybe, you might consider maybe up to 10 kind of core services or something like that you'd be pointing people to in those scenarios. So it's probably not one where we'd kind of lead people to that outcome that's kind of, of those whole sort of 375 services. I don't know, James, does that fit with your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of the questions we're using in this, from speaking to professionals, it was quite simple stuff like if they hadn't spoken to their GP yet, there were certain things they can't access. So a lot of it was down to have you spoken to your GP yet, and then the education side is have you spoken to your school or your teacher yet. If they have already, then we'd link them off to further advice. But if they hadn't spoken to their school yet, then it would be quite basic content of advice of how to speak to your GP and who at your school could help.
Thanks very much. Well, I was expecting lots of hands because there was so much going on in the chat. Thanks, Andy. I was expecting lots of hands because there was so much going on in the chat. Does anyone want to ask a question as opposed to write it in the chat? Or make a comment, even? Melanie, go for it. You've saved it.
Hi. I was just thinking, so one of the things we've been looking at is, or thinking about, is chatbots, because some of these questions, I wonder, it's about directing people to the right content, and chatbots is quite a nice way of doing that, because you've obviously got information in multiple places, we find, and obviously quite often it depends where that situation is as to where you need to direct the user. For example, flooding is a really classic, where if it's on the street, it's one service. If it's your house, it's another service. It depends what your house is. If it's, you know, rented or you own it, and there's all these kind of multiple layers, and it's quite difficult to build that into forms and directories and things like that. And I just wondered if anyone had been thinking anything about using chatbots to kind of direct people to the right service. I know they're a bit of a kind of, everyone always goes, oh, chatbots, and I'm not a massive fan of them, but I did wonder if that was one opportunity.
Ben?
So we looked at a ton of stuff in the very early prototyping phases around the stuff I shared about what we did back at Bucks, and chatbots is a bit of a trigger for me. No chatbots. So what we found was they had, in the previous product, really over-engineered a lot of complexity into how the searching worked. So I think they'd gone down a similar route, albeit with older technology, where there was an assumption that you could create this perfect search as a user or ask the perfect question, and the technology would magic up a combination of content and services to steer you off on your way. And frankly, I think that's largely nonsense. And certainly the testing found that life is just so much more complicated than that. And so many of these users are coming at this from so many different angles with different needs, different skills, and breaking it down to first principles, which was kind of largely what I guess I talked about, was the right way forward, certainly in the start. So getting yourself to that point where you can confidently say, we've got really well-architected, well-governed content that we understand meets user need and follows some kind of logical user journey. Our data is really well curated, governed, accurate, up to date, is in a usable product. I think when you're there, kick on and explore and play and prototype. But I think for so many of us, we're not even there. And there's a ton of work to get to there. And once you're there, it can be quite fleeting. Like, this stuff falls apart really quickly if you don't hold on to it and manage it well. So I think, when you feel like you're in a really good, solid, sustainable point, that's where I would probably want to start exploring some of this. But others will have different views, I'm sure. But that's my personal bias on this stuff.
No, I think it's a really good point. Really, really good point.
Lizzie S.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Bracknell Forest, and we have just started putting in LocalGov directories and LocalGov Drupal directories even. And one of the things we want to look at is obviously bringing our outside directories in. So one of those is the local offer. And Essex mentioned that Ofsted obviously go and look at the SEN provision. Has anyone spoken to Ofsted about bringing in? So at the moment, most councils have a third-party site running their local directory, and obviously Ofsted go and review that. So has anyone spoken to Ofsted or got any guidance around what Ofsted look at in terms of if we bring it in-house, or if they prefer it to be a separate site, or just around those kind of management aspects of it?
Essex, do you want? Oh, Dorset, is that a direct response, Dorset, or you're muted?
Hi, Lizzie. Nice to see you again. We've not long had an Ofsted inspection on SEN, and there was a lot of panic and running around and let's update our content, which was great. Largely speaking, the directory didn't change much because it is what it is. It's not third party; it's done within the council, but it's on a separate platform, and it didn't even get a mention. They weren't really looking at that as the be all and end all in life. It was, how good were services, what are staff's attitude like? So we didn't feel anything Brangle because we were getting the pressure to let's make this thing better, but it was all about the real stuff about helping kids.
Nicholas, do you want
Yeah,
to?
I just concur with Neil on that. Absolutely, that you know what we heard from Ofsted was that it's not well known. Parents don't know it exists, and you know there was a mention of it not being easy to navigate and not well understood. But there, you know, Ofsted within the context of that wider report, Ofsted weren't getting into the detail about how and why. It was really just a kind of a nudge rather than at the top of the list.
They don't have guidelines on what you should be doing, other than I guess ask content standards and making sure it actually works. Is that okay? That's really helpful. Thank you.
Ben.
Yeah, so I'll just say, Lizzie, so yeah, all of that, plus if you're looking at bringing in your connection to the Ofsted feed of data from a third-party platform back into something you're hosting or managing, or a supplier that hasn't previously connected to that feed, build time into your program. The approval process is slow. There is paperwork, there is governance, and I think there's a board that meets infrequently at the Ofsted end to approve new connections to that data feed. So just, do the technical due diligence on that and start like now, if that's in the plan.
Okay, thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much for those responses. Does anybody else have a question or a comment? Or Jeremy. Jeremy and
Hi, sorry. Yeah, Ben, you said it takes time, but you didn't put a number on the time that it takes to get approved by Ofsted to be holding their feed.
I didn't get a number from them, but recalling how it happened. I think it honestly depends where you're at in their cycle of approval boards for taking new connections. So there's a bit of technical kind of back and forth that you'll need between your development team and the folks who look after the infrastructure at the Ofsted end. I think if you magic yourself into there's a board in a month, I think it might be quick. If you've just missed one, I think there's a bit of a delay. So just start the conversation, get the paperwork. As I remember it, they actually outsource the API infrastructure to a third party. So there's a double-step relationship that you have to kind of figure out with them. So just start exploring. It was a bit of a technical risk, and it was a bit of a pain for us.
Thanks very much. And Steve, you're next.
Thanks a lot. I was just thinking about this issue of searching for what you're looking for, and on our current directory, which is provided by Open Objects, we've got the categorization, obviously, and then there are the key words that you type in to find what you're looking for, and it's quite a laborious process on the back end, having to put in, potential search words. And I don't know if there's any way of automating this on the back end, looking at, say, synonyms, that kind of thing, just to, think ahead on, social isolation is one of the terms that we obviously use in social care, but, general public wouldn't type that in. They might type in depression, loneliness, that kind of thing. If anyone's got any thoughts on that side.
There was another hand that went up and then disappeared. So apologies that. It was Mike. It was Mike. Go, Mike. And then it's Will.
Yeah, I really just wanted to repeat what I'd said with Ben in the chat. I don't fully understand why, if we're taking data from Ofsted to put in an open public directory, we have to go through a private approvals process in the first place. I do understand that Ofsted has private data, which it can exclude, but we should all be asking Ofsted to do a one-off RESTful API of their public data, ideally in the Open Referral UK format, but otherwise we can transform it to that and all use it rather than everyone go through this archaic application process. And I was very disappointed that the FutureGov had to spend a lot of time on the Essex project dealing with that, and everyone else is going to have to spend the same time on their projects. Let's get together and lobby to make it open and public, like the digital declaration says it should be.
Thanks for that, Mike. There's definitely one to continue in your Slack channel, right? And you can all get on with the lobbying. Will, you had your hand up and then took it down. So do you want to speak or?
Operator error. Just to Mike's point, we want to do this once for all 24 LocalGov Drupal councils. So if we want to go lever this, it's a good time to go and have that conversation with Ofsted. If you want to do that, we'd be very up for it. My question was about, excuse me, is what can we all do together? So this session originated from, so Ellie at Haringey posted a message on Slack. I don't know if you're here, Ellie. Thank you for your idea, and here we all are. You might want to say something about this as well if you like, but around collaboration and what we're all going to do together. And I've had some thoughts about what we could do, but I guess it's like an open question to everybody. Is there mileage? Yeah, like Neil says, can we pool all our user research, for example? Is there mileage in doing more than that? Yeah, open question.
Great, thanks, Will. Keelan, while people cogitate on that for a second, Keelan, you had your hand up previously. You could respond to that, or you could say what you wanted to say, or both.
I was going to say something, but then I realised it was actually wrong what I was going to say. I was going to say something which is actually false, so I'm not going to say it.
It's a good self-editing in the nick of time.
I was hoping no one would notice the hand, but you caught me out. Tim.
Well, there's been a couple of user errors of hands going up and down, and so I thought I've been writing names down even though they disappear. So does anyone want to respond to Will's point around sharing user data? I mean, do people? I mean, maybe you can show your hand if I ask a question. Do people have user data that they can share? Because I was thinking
that wasn't really what that
wasn't what
I
you
said.
asking,
No,
right.
I'm not about to share all our user data with people. It's we've all got assets and thoughts and ideas about where this should go. There's a cross-government intranet thing which I've never been to, but I hear really good things about it. And is there something like that for this? I don't know, a cross-government directory thing. And I don't know what the frequency of the intranet thing is, but something similar to that. And we can just come and show stuff like this rather than it being a one-off. I don't know. Thinking aloud.
Does anyone want to comment on that? No. Okay, Bethany.
Just in the nick of time. Yeah, I think so. I don't know whether the cross-gov thing is to do with set up by the internet team at Greenwich. It might be. But yeah, I think in terms of Greenwich, we'd absolutely be up for that. And maybe we have some sort of lean coffee style meetups or something where we discuss different topics to do with directories. But I think whatever, some sort of cross-gov thing would be really good so we can continue the conversation. And I know in terms of us, we've had lots of conversations with lots of different local authorities who I kept pinging over the invite from this today, which Will, you kept gracefully inviting people on my behalf. So I think there's definitely energy from it, from people that we've spoken to, and definitely from us. So from Greenwich, definitely, yeah.
Thanks very much, Bethany. Constance, you had your hand up and then it went down. Would you like to comment, or have you self-edited as well?
No, someone's just posted it in the chat. So Will, I know you were saying how can we collaborate further, but you did mention user research, and as a user researcher, I'm going to quickly come in on that. At Greenwich, so we are at kind of the early stage of our discovery, and I've chatted to lots of people here, other local authorities who have also done user research. And the problem is the same. So we're all sort of moving to the same thing. How people find local information will be largely the same. There will be nuances between councils, but local offer, for example, something that we have as our statutory offer, loads of the insights that I've been given have been so helpful in kickstarting thinking. So I am here for anybody who does want to send user insights. I can also send them out from the Greenwich side as well. But yeah, I'm a huge believer in sharing. Someone has just shared the user research library as well, which I think was set up initially by Hackney, which is a fantastic source to go to on these sort of problems.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Ellie, you're next. And then
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie from Hackney, and I just wanted to echo what Will said, basically that it would be really amazing if we could create some sort of like community of practice where we could all chit and chat. So for context, my tool has been live and active for over a year now, so we're in quite a different phase to I think a lot of the tools that are being created. So for me, I'm thinking about things like, you know, iterating based on what we already have, but also things like promotion, and if, you know, anyone else is having issues with organizations being willing to update their listings and things like that. So yeah, I agree. If we could set up any kind of regular meetup where we could sort of have these discussions as we all move through, I think that would be a really great outcome. And also I'm down to share user research, because I think we've not got loads, but we've got like enough. So that's what I want to say.
That's great. Thanks, Ellie. Ben.
Yeah, so yes, I mean, I can absolutely. I think Keelan's probably already shared some stuff in the chat. So for our Essex team, 100%, we'll keep doing everything in the open. Come to our show and tells. We'll keep chucking stuff on the blog. We'll keep sharing all of the kind of deeper insights we have. I'm also digging back through my archives of the Bucks work. So I found a dozen or so slide decks of various phases of the work. So for folks who really want to get into the weeds on that, you can kind of see a bit of a sequential journey through a bunch of show and tells where the story kind of evolved. So yeah, I'll dig that out, and if we've got somewhere to chuck it all, probably Slack for now, we'll do that.
I mean, what I can do is when the recording's done, we can get it on a page on our site, and we can start to dump everything there in a well laid out sort of style. Will.
I was just thinking, I don't know how the CrossGov intranet meeting works, but we've recently sort of relaunched the product group at LocalGov Drupal, which is basically where we decide all the things about what we're building next. And the format is it's quite nice and punchy, in that you know, there are different working groups for forms and directories soon and microsites and things like that. And the person running these things comes and shares what they're doing with the rest. And I'm a Tim or Mia, the MC, just to keep it kind of rolling. And I think it'd be really nice if we had a Directories one of those. And it can be anyone running it. I mean, when I was at GDS and did this, it used to rotate, different people used to run it. So, you know, it's almost like hands up who wants to come to one of those once a month, I think. And I don't think you need to make a slide deck, you know, much as they're lovely and there were amazing things today. I'm always picking up tips about slide decks, so thank you. But almost just bring whatever the newest thing is, you know, or a bit of news or a bit of research. Here's a thing we've already made. We just bring that. And it's always interesting. That's all the product folks do at LocalGov Drupal, is bring the latest thing, and we talk about that. So I'm up for that if anyone else is. Like, I don't know, Friday afternoons or something, or, you know, maybe that's a bad idea, Friday afternoons. Monday mornings.
No, that sounds great, and maybe we can help facilitate that, Will. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're up for facilitating whatever.
Brilliant. We've got 15 minutes left. Do we have any other questions or comments on anything that we've seen or heard? No. Well, maybe we can wrap it up early, and that's quite a good note to end on. You know, a commitment, if you like, to try and build on what we've done and meet again in the coming weeks. I guess Will can maybe help facilitate that on your Slack channel, and we can put something in our diary and send that out to everybody who's been in this meeting. If that sounds like a good way forward. I guess people that have put together presentations for today, if you could send them to us at hello@localgovdrupal.org, then we'll get all those into the blog, along with any other links of sort of open user research, and I'll link off to that as well, and we can start to build up a bit of, I hesitate to use the word directory, but a list. a list of those things that we've got, and we can maybe find a way of curating them that's a bit better in the long run. But it's a good start. It'll be a good start anyway. Will, do you want to say anything else before we go?
I mean, I just helped put this together, so I'm not going to say a lot. And maybe Ellie is the person who had this idea. You might want to say something to close. I mean, I'm just interested in what you all thought about this session, really, because I thought it was great. and really useful and loads to think about. Wasn't massively diverse. So it's all men of a certain age, sadly, but the audience was. So let's do something about that next time if we have another one of these. Send us any thoughts you might have for a future one, and we'll absolutely do our bit. We'll chip in and help. So Ellie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this has been invaluable, to be honest with you. I've been scribbling down notes this whole time of things that I'd like to look into for our tool. So yeah, I think if we carry on and create some sort of space for us to keep on talking about it, I think that we can all really make some ground together. And I think this sounds good. I'm excited.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone for presenting. Thanks to Ellie for coming up with the idea, for Will to helping to put it together, for everyone's questions and everyone's comments. I think Will's going to get everything from the chat. I think Ryan, you've got the recording, and so if people can ping things over to me, I'll put something together. Hopefully early next week. So unless anyone else has got anything to say, I think we'll close it there, and people get 10 minutes probably before their next meeting, right? Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thanks very much.
So,
Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much.
I suggested you get grabbing everything from the chat, Will, because you're host. So if any,
I've bagged it. Yeah,
I've
got it.
last time. You can stick it in if you stick it in a Trello ticket, and then